Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. From the DC Extended Universe comes one of the most legendary superhero teams of all time, bringing together an iconic cast of characters never before seen in one film on an epic adventure fighting to defeat an otherworldly force that threatens to destroy the planet. We're talking about Justice League. Justice League was the fifth film in DC Comics' extended universe. It was directed by Zack Snyder on a script by Chris Terrio and Joss Whedon. The film brought together DC's heavy hitters including Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, while also introducing The Flash, Aquaman, and Cyborg. The heroes formed the Justice League at the behest of Batman, portrayed by Ben Affleck, who believed that Earth would soon be under attack by the world-conquering Steppenwolf and his army of parademons. Henry Cavill played Superman, reprising his role from Man of Steel in Superman vs. Batman. Superman did not appear in the first half of Justice League due to his death at the end of BVS. Batman assembled his new team, but it soon became apparent that without Superman, the Justice League would likely not succeed. Gal Gadot returned as Wonder Woman, joined by Ezra Miller as The Flash, Jason Momoa as Aquaman, and Ray Fisher as Cyborg. The heroes, while unconvinced of their ability to work as a unit, decided to follow Batman's lead, which ultimately led them back to Superman. The primary thrust of the film was the Man of Steel's absence and subsequent resurrection, which brought the team to full power by the third act. The showdown between Steppenwolf and the Justice League was the final battle of the film, which saw all of the heroes working together to win the day. Justice League suffered through a troubled production almost from the start, with rewrites and reshoots coming near the end. Zack Snyder was forced to step away from the film due to a family tragedy and was replaced by Joss Whedon, who attempted to lighten the tone of the movie with humor. Whedon's behavior on set later became the topic of controversy, and it was apparent that the movie was headed for disaster. Justice League was released in the United States on November 17, 2017, and was immediately bashed by fans and movie critics alike. The film greatly underperformed at the box office, taking in a total of $657 million worldwide, but the estimated break-even point was much higher, causing a total loss of around $60 million. Much of the criticism surrounding the film stemmed from the poor CG and overall plot, which seemed disjointed from start to finish. Those problems, combined with fan perception that DC was moving too fast to catch up to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, led to Justice League becoming a widely panned effort. Gal Gadot was considered a bright spot of the film, and the same was true of Ezra Miller and Jason Momoa. Though the cast attempted to make the best of the situation, it was evident during the press tour for the movie that there were issues behind the scenes. Though DC moved forward with Aquaman in his own solo movie as well as the sequel to Wonder Woman, the future of the extended universe remains tenuous at best. There has been no talk of rebooting or continuing the Justice League as a franchise, as DC now appears to be solely focused on the individual characters. New hope has arrived for the Justice League, however, as Snyder has returned to the project, once again assembling the cast and going through even more reshoots. The widely dubbed Snyder Cut will reportedly give fans the film as the director initially saw it and is set for release in mid-2021. And that's the lowdown on Justice League. So most of the time on the show, I talk about Marvel, and I've done a lot of Marvel. And I've done the big movies, Black Panther, of course, and Infinity War and Endgame, and the whole Marvel Universe. Did an episode about the Hulk. And as a kid, I grew up reading Marvel Comics. I mean, that's where it was at. I had DC as well. It's not like I wasn't familiar with who they are. Everyone knows who Batman is. Everyone knows who Superman is. That's a given. Wonder Woman, of course. The Flash, yes. Green Lantern, obviously. I mean, all these characters, if you're a kid growing up reading comics, you're very aware of who all these characters are. But if I said that DC dominated my existence as a kid, that would be a lie, because for me it was Marvel first, Marvel last. There's just something about the Marvel way of storytelling where the stories are very real. You can relate to the characters. The characters feel like they're in the same room with you. They've got the same problems you have. They've got the same sort of life that you have. They run into the same weird, bizarre situations, except for the wacky superpowers and costumes, of course, and supervillains. But you kind of get the sense that, hey, Peter Parker's got problems like I am. I'm kind of an outcast in school. I can relate to this guy. I can't really say that about DC, and I've never really been able to. But after having watched Justice League again, I am sort of reminded of the separation, at least for me, that exists between the Marvel and DC universes. And I don't want this one to be, oh, let's pick apart this DC film and compare it to Marvel every single step of the way. Because, Phil, I don't know about you, but when I rewatched this last night, I tried my best to go into this thing with a clean slate in my head. I try not to think about the Marvel films. I just wanted to take this one for what it's worth. So after having watched this again for the first time in a very long time, what's your initial take from this film?
It's interesting. I remember I saw it in theaters when it first came out. Like it's wild when you think about it now that it's 3 years old too. But when I saw it 3 years ago, I remember thinking, "Oh, okay, this isn't too bad." Like I enjoyed it for what it was, and I rewatched it last night, and I was like, "Oh, this is kind of all over the place."
Right. Right, yeah. And, for me, it all goes back to the storytelling, which I know we're probably going to get into quite a bit of that on this one. But as I said before, man, Marvel just has a way of doing it. And it's really easy for me to relate to their characters. And maybe not everyone feels that way. Maybe a lot of guys and gals are out there like, hey, comic books are an escape. That's what I watch it for. That's what I read it for. I don't care if I relate to anyone. I just want to have fun. And I can respect that. But, man, watching this movie... And there again, they take some, not that the Avengers haven't done some damage in their films. Let's call it fair, right down the middle, I guess. But man, once again, the DC universe has laid waste, and it's Armageddon in every scene. And you've got the crazy camera filters happening, and it's the slow motion hair flip of Gal Gadot, and I'm not trying to hit the talking points. But man, when I watch that movie, I'm like, oh, stop with the usual suspects, man. Am I crazy on that or what?
No, I think it definitely has a lot of the Snyder stylistic choices, and that's depending on your mileage with Snyder, how much you like his aesthetic, then it gets a little bit tiresome to watch sometimes. And I mean, this was more subdued than some of his other stuff. And I mean, that's one of the other problems. I'm sure we'll get into that later. The clashing of Whedon's style and Snyder's style in this makes it an even bigger mess.
Oh yeah, it does tend to feel like two separate movies happening. And as we record this, we are months away from what the fans are calling the Snyder Cut, which isn't really a thing. It's more or less like this is what Zack Snyder wanted to do, but he had to leave the film, I think, 3/4 of the way through it, maybe not quite that much or whatever it is. So he didn't get the movie that he wanted, and they went back and put, I think the number is upwards of $70-some million now. It's insane the amount of money they're putting into this. And I'm like, look, all you had to do for me was, fix his lip. Just fix the guy's lip. I mean, my God, the CG was right. Tell me it's not the first thing you saw when Henry Cavill showed up on screen. It's the first. I couldn't take my eyes off of it, man. It was awful.
It's so awkward. Like the first scene of the movie with the camera footage,
Yes.
the phone camera footage, and the kid is talking to Superman. It looks so bad.
It's
so
awful.
bad.
And that could have been so good and so sweet of a little scene. And you hear that little kid and he's awestruck, and Superman's trying to be as human as he can be. And I can't take my eyes off that damn lip. Like, dude, come on. I mean, at what point did the Mission Impossible people win that argument? I'd love to have been in the room when the DC people said, well, it's all right. He could keep the mustache. We'll figure something out. I mean, what?
I'm trying to stop laughing because I still have it so fresh in my head because I watched it last night, and like every time you could see the scenes that were the reshoots, and it just looks so atrocious. And I mean, I will say this: this is the most that I liked Henry Cavill in the role. This is the most likable he is as Superman, in my opinion.
Right.
But God, that the CG on his face looks so bad.
Yeah, it's blatantly obvious to me. I I don't even know what to compare it to. I don't know that I've ever seen anything in a film before that has been obviously so distracting. That's just completely took me out of it. I mean, it's pretty bad when the opening scene, you're completely out of it. I just, at that point, I'm like, God, was this my idea to do this show? God, what was I thinking? So, yeah, man, I don't know. It distracted me. I noticed it every step of the way. And you're right, dude. The reshoot scenes are blatantly obvious. It's there for the whole world to see. And there again, I can't get over the fact that was allowed to happen. And what kills me is we're talking about the iconic character of Superman. I mean, most people attribute this entire culture of comic books and geekdom and nerd culture back to Superman. Let's face it, man. I mean, had this thing not worked, we wouldn't even be talking about this stuff right now. We wouldn't maybe not even be talking about Stan Lee. Everything came from Superman. Everything came from that.
Yeah.
So he plays this iconic character, the head of the table, as it were. And the character he played in Mission Impossible, I couldn't even tell you that guy's name. But that film won the argument, and that kills me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's just such a weird scenario. I mean, I guess I understand, because the other thing when I watched the movie, again, this just still seems like, it doesn't seem like it was 3 years ago. But I had to go back and read some of the history behind the production of it, and I had to go and look at some articles about it to remember what was going on and why did they do so many reshoots. Because the other thing I noticed last night, all of the scenes that Cavill was in, it looks like they were all reshoots. Like, I don't think they used any of the real footage with Cavill in it. So when I looked it up, I had tried to figure out why did they replace so much footage.
Right.
And from what I understood is that Batman vs. Superman did so poorly, critically, that they had to change the tone of it. And then there were other problems with the length of the movie, which, of course, now that we see with the Snyder Cut, it's going to be 4 hours, which is crazy. So, yeah, I mean, just everything I was reading about this movie and just everything I was taking in after I watched it, it's just, this whole production of this thing is just a complete and utter mess. And it just, the whole time I was just thinking, it shouldn't be this hard to do Justice League. Like, when you really think about it, Avengers is a tougher movie to make, because up until, I don't know, maybe 20, 15 years ago, the Avengers weren't flagship characters. I don't think people remember that.
Good point.
The Avengers were not flagship characters. The X-Men were.
Right.
So when you think of Justice League is all of DC's flagship characters. It's Wonder Woman, it's Batman, it's Superman. These are all the most recognizable superheroes in the world. It shouldn't be that hard to make a Justice League movie, and it shouldn't be that hard to get, I don't know, just to get the bare semblance of the characters correct.
And these characters at their most basic, and I was talking before about being able to relate to characters. I mean, people do have a deep connection to Batman because Batman is human. He's, the prevailing notion has always been if you had a few $1 billion, unlimited resources, and a vendetta to wage, then there's a possibility that you could be at least a third of what Bruce Wayne is in the comics. It's possible. It's maybe not 100% likely, but it's at least achievable. I can't become an alien and get superpowers. That's not going to happen. So at its most basic, some of these characters should be, I don't want to say easy, but like you said, man, it shouldn't be this hard.
No. No. This was I don't know. I mean, just everything about the production and everything just made it seem like this was pulling teeth to create. And I mean, watching it at some points was pulling teeth, because it's like, it shouldn't be that hard to put together a conflict to bring the Justice League together, and then that should be the thrust of the movie. I feel like a lot of the movie around putting them together is it's just needlessly convoluted at times. And then other times I think it suffers, and as you said at the beginning, you don't want to compare everything to what Marvel does, but I think other points of the movie suffer because they didn't take the time to flesh out these characters until they brought them into the main movie. Marvel did this genius thing where they gave everybody else their own movie and they fleshed out these characters. So once you get them together in their own movie, it's like, oh yeah, I know that guy. I already know his motives. I already know who he is. I already know his origin story. In this movie, you not only have to bring them together in this convoluted way, but you also have to give each of these characters some kind of background in some way.
It's almost like the people behind this production said, well, look, the fans are going to come. It's Justice League. They know the stories. This will be fine. And I'm thinking, okay, sure. The comic book fanboys and girls, they'll come out. Yeah, okay. I can't argue with that. But if you want mass appeal, to your point, you got to give us something, some kind of backstory, something that, and dude, it's a good point you made about the Marvel films. You went into Avengers with history behind it. So you remembered, you're like, oh, I remember that from the first Thor movie. Oh, that makes sense here. And he said this here and she said this here. And it all clicked. And it took, I mean, dude, face it, man, the MCU is layers upon layers upon layers of texture and subplots and characterizations. But it's not like people say, oh, well, Tom, it's too intense. Yeah, but dude, if you go back and watch the films one by one, it's not like a labor. It's not like an arduous task. If you enjoy the films, you don't have to, well, I must commit this to memory to watch the Avengers. No, it'll just be in your head. It's already there. Yeah. But it's almost like the DC people said, well, people already know the origins here. Let's just make this film.
And that could have worked because, as I said earlier, these are three of the most well-known superheroes in the world. The ones that you really needed to give some backdrop to was Cyborg and probably Aquaman a little bit. But Flash and Batman and Wonder Woman, these are all well-known superheroes. You could have easily put them together in a movie without an origin. Everybody knows Batman's origin at this point. Everybody knows Superman's origin. But I feel like what didn't work to a degree and what Marvel also did so well is you not only created these fully formed characters before you put them all in their own movie. Once they do come together, you have this very rewarding sequence. Like, I think that's one of the best things about the first Avengers movie is when they're all broken up and Nick Fury comes in and he gives the speech to the guys on the helicarrier about Coulson's death, and then you get that montage of everybody suiting up and eventually coming back together, and it's so amazingly done. And nothing in this movie is that rewarding, and that shouldn't be the case. This is a movie about Justice League. You've got this team of the greatest superheroes in the world. You should have been able to pull together something better than what we got.
100% agree. It's kind of like, in a weird way, a relationship, right? Where she's beautiful, she's the one, you're convinced of it, but man, every day's drama, and you know what I mean? And maybe you don't want to say it out loud, but in the back of your head, it eventually hits you. God, this is too hard. Why is this so hard all the time? Because to your point, this film should have just clicked. And when the stories are coming out now about Joss Whedon and Ray Fisher, who portrayed Cyborg, has said some pretty heavy stuff. And, we have this scene where the Flash, Ezra Miller, falls on Gal Gadot and he's laying on top of her, and she refused to do that scene. She was uncomfortable with it. I'm like, well, she shouldn't have to do it. Why are we doing this? There's so many weird moments that happen. You're like, why did we just see that? Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of that in the movie. And, as you said, I don't want to make this bash DC or bash Warner podcast, but it just was a lot of things that just didn't work here. Now, on another note, I will say on second watch, I do think the cast of this movie is really good. I think everybody they cast is pretty good in their role when they're allowed to do things that are interesting and not weird. I think Affleck's good as Batman when he's not trying to be funny and he's not trying to lead the team in this weird I'm your friend way.
Right.
I think Cavill is really good. One of the best scenes in the movie, in my opinion, is when Steppenwolf, which I'm sure we'll talk about Steppenwolf at one point.
Yes. Yes.
But Steppenwolf is monologuing, and he says something about the truth. And when he says that, that's when Superman appears for the first time in a cape, and he says, "I know something about truth, but also know about justice." And I thought that was one of the better scenes in the movie because it seemed like something right out of a comic strip. It's exactly how, not corny, but exactly how you want Superman to be. You want him to be jovial in that way.
But I couldn't take my eyes off his lip. I tried.
Exactly.
I tried. And dude, I wanted to enjoy that moment. I'm like, yes, he's here. It's Superman. There's his lip. And I couldn't stand it. Like, and God, God, what's going to title this episode? The lip conspiracy. I don't know. It's terrible. But no, dude, you're right. I get what you're saying. And Superman is a character that operates in broad daylight, kind of like Spider-Man in the Marvel Universe. He's in broad daylight. The sun's out. The birds are flying. There's pigeons. He's not Batman where it's dark and bloody and gothic and back alleys. He should be approachable. He should have a smile on his face. He shouldn't be dark and somber, which is what the issues I had with Man of Steel. Superman's not a murderer. Superman that I know does not snap General Zod's neck on public television for the whole world to see. It's streaming. It's hitting YouTube. Of course, Lex Luthor gets traction after that because he's like, look, see what he did to his own people. What do you think he'll do to us? I mean, I'm Lex Luthor in that instance. I agree with him totally.
Yeah. And, but see, that's again why I feel like this was probably their best usage of Superman.
Yes.
And the thing that kind of bugged me is it didn't feel earned. It didn't, like his death didn't feel earned. I felt like the way that the montage at the beginning with everybody mourning his death didn't feel earned because we don't have enough of a connection with this Superman to feel that kind of grief. And not just that, but you're coming off of a movie where most of the movie you've told us throughout Batman versus Superman that the world hates him. So now you're trying to say in this very cynical way that, oh, once he's dead, now you guys appreciate him. But that's not the relationship that we should want between the world and Superman. Like, it shouldn't be that we appreciate him after he's dead. Like, no, that Superman is supposed to give people hope before that. He shouldn't need to die to give people hope. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely. And I will say this, that there's some of this film is it's pitch perfect in terms of the dialogue. Not all of it, because I take issue with a lot of the dialogue in this film. But when he comes back and he looks at Bruce and when he's all whacked out and doesn't know what's going on, he says, "You won't let me live and you won't let me die." That's great. That's great. Because Batman's kind of to blame here. He's, no, you're right. I don't want to bash, but I'll put this point to you as well. My issue with Batman v Superman was Bruce Wayne's first inclination is, well, gonna have to kill this guy. I'm like, excuse me? Aren't you Batman who doesn't murder? Like, what are we talking about here? But that was his knee-jerk reaction. Well, gonna have to kill this guy. Okay. Well, it's crazy.
Well, but see, this version of Batman is the same thing that I don't like about how we got to this version of Superman. I don't feel like this version of Batman is earned either, because you're trying to throw us immediately in with Dark Knight Rises Batman, where he's already old and bitter and defeated, and like that Batman works as a standalone story, but you got to get us to that point. You can't just introduce us to Batman as this, no, I'm super paranoid, we have to get rid of all the aliens. No, you can't just go straight to that. That doesn't work. And I really hated that about Batman versus Superman. I will just throw that out there. I did not like Batman versus Superman at all. And I didn't despise this movie like I despised that movie. But I think a lot of the things that Batman versus Superman set up hurt this movie. And I think Batman's characterization is one of the casualties of that.
I agree with that. I'm with you on every point you just made. I was not a fan of Batman v Superman, and you and I spoke off air, I think, about that film, and I told you that I took my son to see it in the theater, and we were both so sick, and I can't remember if it was the sinus infection. Anyway, it actually became the flu at one point, and I don't know what I was thinking. I'd promised him I would take him, and he was 9 at the time, and so we went, and God, he was so sick, and we coughed through the whole thing. And oh man, the people around us were probably, I'm sure, not happy. But I'm like, well, at least we're a pleasant distraction from this garbage going on the screen right now. So, the sickness was much more fun than the film. But yeah, I didn't get it at all. I guess that's what, the difference between Batman v Superman and Civil War was, Cap didn't want to fight Iron Man. Tony didn't want to fight Cap. It came to that. You had this build up from the first bit of friction they had in the first Avengers film all the way through. They always rubbed each other the wrong way. They always came together, but there was always a fundamental disagreement in their viewpoints, their philosophies on life, on war, on everything in between. And, when it came time for the mission, they set aside their differences. But, like we said, man, Bruce Wayne saw Superman flying around and said, well, got to kill this guy. And Superman's like, well, I dare you. And they're on that rooftop and Superman just flies away. I'm like, okay, you just flew away. What, why? I don't know. I mean, the Superman in the comic books would have been like, look, we don't know each other. Can we just talk about this? I'll talk to you anywhere at any time. You don't have to try to kill me. I'm not a threat to you or anybody else. But no, he says what he says and flies off. And I'm like, okay, it's going to be that kind of film. The whole thing felt backwards. But I'll say this to you. I agree with you 100% about Justice League. I didn't get that tone with this. So at some point, I would think maybe they learned their lesson. Maybe is a weird way to put it. Maybe they learned, wow, that thing was the Titanic. We can't let this film become that. But yeah, the tone of this, which I think was helped quite a bit by some of the acting, because Ray Fisher, in my opinion, was the best part of this film. I thought he was great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just, I think the reshoots and just everything that was happening on a production wise is why we got such a lighter film. Mm-hmm. And that was to its detriment at times, because it was just such of a clash with what we were presented with at the beginning of the movie and in its prequels. So sometimes it worked and sometimes it just looked clumsy.
It was forced. Yeah.
But the cast was great. I wouldn't, I can't say enough good things about the cast. I think Momoa is good. He doesn't really feel like Aquaman in this movie. He feels a lot more like Aquaman in his own movie. But I think he's entertaining in this movie. I think, like you said, Fisher's great. I really like Ezra Miller. He really reminds me of everything that I like about Wally West's Flash, even though he's Barry Allen. Mm-hmm. And I can't say enough good things about Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I think she is far and away the star of DCEU. I think she's the biggest star of the franchise by far.
I agree with that. I think she's the best thing they have going, and she seems committed to the role. I don't get this feeling like, Affleck, we heard, like they did that press junket for Justice League, I think it was, and he was not happy. I mean, you see him sitting next to Cavill, and man, he's just like, God, I don't want to be here. And I don't think it had anything to do with the actors. He was just like, it was obvious this thing wasn't working, and there was too much stuff going on behind the scenes. So, yeah, she just seems like she's having fun. And that, to me, is what makes the MCU work, is that almost everyone is on board. Yeah, they want to get paid. Let's call it what it is. It's a great payday. But at the same time, man, listen, you could be as rich can be. But, dude, if you're miserable, I mean, how many rock stars have ended their lives because, oh, that guy's a millionaire, why'd he do it? Because he had problems. He wasn't happy. It was killing him. Money does not equal happiness in most respects. So, if you're enjoying what you do, then it's going to be all worthwhile. But, man, I'm with you. She totally looks like that she's enjoying herself, and she is the best thing that they have going. Now, if they could just build around her moving forward, I don't think you get an issue like we had with this film again, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think there's other, like, you can tell that there's a camaraderie amongst some of the members of the cast. And I think it's not quite on par with what we saw from the original 6 in the Avengers, because you could tell they were having a blast making that movie. But I think part of what makes Gail stand out is that she got a chance to have her own movie and have her own success in her own movie, and then come and make this movie. it wasn't such a it wasn't such a tough experience with Batman versus Superman, and it wasn't such a critical failure in the same way. Um, and I think Momoa, you could tell Momoa is having a blast making it too, but that's also why I kind of wish they would have made the Aquaman movie first,
Right.
and people got more of an introduction to him as a character. I think that would have helped this movie a lot. Um, but I didn't think he was bad in it. He just didn't really feel like Aquaman to me. Um,
And you know,
but
to that point though, and I like Momoa a lot. But Momoa to me is a lot like Keanu Reeves. Momoa's not really, he's not really losing himself in the character. They're just like, hey man, who am I playing? Aquaman, cool. And Keanu Reeves is, not that there's anything wrong with that, but Keanu Reeves is kind of the same way. And I love the John Wick films. I'm sorry. The first John Wick is a freaking masterpiece. But
yeah,
he's kind of the same way where it's like, this is Keanu Reeves playing John Wick. In this movie, this is Jason Momoa playing Aquaman. It's not, well, that's Black Panther. No, and you rarely say that's Chadwick Boseman playing Black Panther. No, that's right. Black Panther. That's what it feels like.
Yeah,
but
I agree with that.
It doesn't feel like that with Momoa. Dude, to me, Momoa's Lobo. I think he's miscast.
I think he would be a fantastic Lobo. I thought the same thing. Yeah, I do think he handles the material a little bit better in Aquaman, but I think that's just because the story in Aquaman is better. I'm not sure if that means that Momoa has grown into this role anymore so much that the surroundings around him are just better. And I do agree. I think they're trying to go with the same thing with him that they did with Hemsworth. But the thing is, Hemsworth works in that role because there are certain aspects of Thor's character that fit that. And to me, that's just not who Aquaman is. Aquaman isn't a dude bro surfer guy. He's a regal king. He's a king. And I mean, I get you have to build him up now because you're doing this origin story with Aquaman, but I just never got the feeling that he had any of this regalness to him.
That's a great point. You're right. Hemsworth does have to have that, for lack of a better word, flair. He has to have a flair and a swagger and an ability, I guess you could say. I mean, you can completely envision and see Hemsworth wearing your crown if the scene called for it, and you would buy it because he does have that air about him that Momoa doesn't have. Momoa's just party on, bro. I mean, and again, it's two different characters. I don't want to say that. Well, Thor is obviously going to, bust Aquaman in the mouth. I mean, I don't know, but it's like, again, it's two different universes, but I can totally see where you're coming from. It makes sense. You are much more kinder to this version of the Flash than I am, because brother, I'll tell you this, Ezra Miller is no Grant Gustin, and that's what I'll say about that.
Oh man, I love Grant as
he's amazing,
Flash,
isn't he?
I agree with you. I think he's great as Flash. He's likable. He's got the everyman thing down. He's perfect in the role. Ezra works because he presents something different, and I like his manicness. I like everything, like his social awkwardness. I like all of those aspects of the character because it's different. And I mean, when you do have somebody that spends all their time alone and they run around, they just run around the world just like on their own, and all they know is moving fast. Like that's kind of how they would act. So I buy it. But what kind of doesn't work is that he's just not a fully formed character. He's kind of a plot device.
That's so well put. Yeah, you're right. He's kind of just, he's like a shadow. He's just kind of there, and you're like, well, I see a shadow, but I don't know who's casting the shadow. It's kind of, yeah, it's the same thing, right? It's like you said, you don't really know what's going on there. He's more of a punchline. He's a bunch of one-liners.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I'm not a big fan of Barry Allen Flash. I grew up with Wally West's Flash. So I always think Wally West when I think Flash. Like he's my Flash. He's the guy that I read the comics when I grew up watching the Justice League cartoon. That's who was in the cartoon. So I don't really have a connection with Barry Allen. Now, given that, I do agree with you that Grant Gustin makes Barry Allen a likable character in the TV show. I feel like Ezra brought his own flair to this character, but it doesn't really feel like Barry Allen. Like he doesn't really come off as what we know of Barry Allen from the comics.
He should have been Wally West. Let's call it for
Yeah,
what it is.
I agree.
Yeah, and he didn't have to be a crime scene investigator. We didn't have to see his father in prison. He could have just had his own story. And since it's DC, and DC has, the infinite Earths, which, my God, how convenient that you can just have infinite Earths, which means your universe will just go on forever. I mean, well, this is Earth 54, and this is Earth 485, and this is Earth, okay, cool. But that's how they can explain that away. And on that Earth, Barry Allen didn't happen. He wasn't there. Barry Allen was never the Flash, but Wally West was. I mean, that would have been fine. Dude, if he had been Wally West, I don't think I would have had an issue at all.
Yeah.
At all.
Well, to your point, I don't understand why you couldn't have just said that Barry Allen was Flash at one point and he passed the mantle on. If you're using an old Batman that has gray hair, why can't you just use Wally West?
Great point. Yeah, great point.
I mean, and the same thing with Cyborg. I think Cyborg is a good character, but Cyborg suffers in this movie from not having his connection to the Teen Titans. And I think that is something that he suffers from in a lot of the newer iterations that I've seen him in. Like, I think Cyborg's a fine character, but a good amount of what fans know about him is that he was a Teen Titan. When you take that away, who is he? And you try and shoehorn Booyah in there, it's like, that doesn't work. You can't have him say Booyah and he was never a Teen Titan.
Right. Yeah. Dude, well, to that point, my Cyborg screams every time he talks, and he's constantly eating food and dancing around. Yeah. So, I could see where you're coming from. I will say this though, when I rewatched it, he was the most compelling, and it kind of feels like, well, we have to make him compelling. This is who they're going to connect to. I kind of get where they were coming from. Maybe I just bought into it, but I don't know. I remembered not really feeling that way upon first viewing, but now 3 years later, I watch it again. I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of digging this. I like the fact that he had just given up. He's like, I shouldn't be here. I should be dead. This is ridiculous. I don't want anything to do with this. I don't know what's going on. This is out of my control. You should have just let me die. You should just leave me for dead. And I thought, man, that's powerful stuff. I mean, he's the most conflicted character in this film. I mean, he's a tortured soul. And then, next to Flash, who's goofy and silly, and he's got the one-liners, and, every time he opens his mouth, it's slapstick. And then next to him is Cyborg, he's the Eeyore of the bunch. He's doom and gloom all the time. So I thought it was a nice compare and contrast.
Yeah. Well, what Snyder says is that Cyborg was supposed to be the heart of the movie, and you supposedly get a better storyline with him in the Snyder cut. And I do think you can get a hint of that. I do think you get hints that Cyborg is kind of like the backbone of this movie, but you don't get any of the you don't really have any finality to his story in this movie, and I feel like that's missing. Like I don't feel like there's a real conclusion to his storyline with his father. I think you just kind of get this moment where he just decides, okay, well, I'm buying in, I'm part of the team, and you don't really have a catalyst for that to happen. It just happens.
Yeah, and to your point, if he's supposed to be the heart of the film, and again, I bought that, I felt that, and I kind of really understood that was supposed to be the point. Whether it came out that way or not, I kind of did see what direction they were going. Then why not begin the film with Cyborg and before the accident? Do you know what I mean? Where you can see he's got the jacket, the Letterman jacket, and he's on the campus, and then we see him smiling and everything's fine, and then we get a very quick, here's what made him Cyborg. And then the movie could kind of open sort of on his shoulder instead of, here's Superman with a funny lip, and now he's dead, and everybody's upset, and there's this sad song this girl's singing, and we're all crying and stuff. Like, yeah. I don't know. Maybe begin the movie a little bit more of an upbeat, where you're like, you really feel bad for this kid, and you immediately connect with him, and then the movie can be told through his eyes, which I think would have been a better film.
Yeah, I think a lot of stuff that they cut with Cyborg definitely hurt it. You can tell those were the parts that are definitely lacking. The opening of this movie it just doesn't work. I mean, from the camera footage part that just ends abruptly to Batman dangling the guy off of a side of a building for the parademon to come.
Right.
The beginning of this movie is very, very clumsy. It just doesn't work. And then you just jump into this montage out of nowhere. It just doesn't work.
And then the criminal gets this sudden, he's suddenly going to reform on this rooftop, and he's talking about Superman dying. Is that what all this is about? What are we going to do now? Yeah, Batman. It's like he's shouldering up to Batman saying, what are we going to do now, bro? What are we going to do now? Like, and then he let him go. He let him go. He just left him there and split. I'm like, not for nothing, Batman. You kind of just let that guy go. You know what I mean? So...
I thought the same thing. It was like, okay, so you just this guy was just hanging off the side of a building. You just watched a alien die in front of you.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you just have this come to Jesus moment where you're like, what are we going to do without Superman? Like, what?
Yeah, I don't have any idea. And I don't know. Like, at the very least, Batman turns around and I don't know, shoots a grappling cable around him and ties him up. I don't know, something. But yeah, So back to the question of Batman, since we're talking about him. Where do you fall in the great debate of who is the best Batman? And we don't have to go crazy long with this, but I mean, is Affleck, is he your Batman? Because to me, it's Christian Bale. I'm sorry. And dude, when the original Batman with Keaton came out, my God, I saw that film in the theater. I don't know how many times. It was 1989, and I was such a fan. I still am. I love that first Batman movie.
Yeah,
and I love Keaton, but man, Christian Bale is. I think they're still trying to get that performance, and I don't think they're going to get it out of anybody they've chosen so far.
Yeah, I'm kind of going to cheat, but for me, the definitive Batman is the Batman from the Batman animated series. He's the best Batman we've ever gotten. I still think
it's cheating.
I still think Mask of the Phantasm is the best Batman movie, bar none.
I agree.
But like in terms of like live action, I would say Bale is probably the best Batman, but there's still a lot of stuff that I don't think that they got right about the character in those movies. I think in terms of like a lot of stuff that goes into just Batman once he puts on like the suit, I think Bale is probably the best we've gotten. In terms of Bruce Wayne, I don't think we've gotten better than Keaton. I think Keaton's the best Bruce Wayne we've had.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Val Kilmer looked amazing as Bruce Wayne. I thought he looked great.
Yeah.
I mean,
he sold a lot of duality of the character too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Terrible movie, but I'm sorry, it's a terrible movie. People crap on the George Clooney version. Brother, they should. You should back a dump truck up to that thing and dump as much crap on it as you want to, because it's god awful.
A lot of people like Forever, though. I'm not a big Batman Forever guy, but I know a lot of people that like it.
Oh, God help us all. No chance. I mean, dude, those two films to me did what did to Batman what MTV did to music. Like MTV in the beginning it was rock, it was rap on the very creation of rap, and it was great, and it was fun, and it was different, and it was cutting edge, and there was acts you'd never heard of, and familiar bands who were getting a second lease on life, and it was awesome. And then it became about everything else. And now MTV is nothing but corporate. The entire thing is a corporate sponsorship, the whole deal. And it's just, they've destroyed it, in my opinion. It's just been destroyed. And to me, that's what they did with Batman. Who at its roots, like we said at the beginning of the show, Batman should be the easiest story to tell of all the DC properties because he's human. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. it's not that much of a stretch to imagine that you lose your parents at a very early age and you spend the rest of your days trying to figure out how to live in peace with that, how to make peace with it. What can I do to give back? I mean, that shouldn't be that hard to figure out.
Yeah. There's a point in the movie where Bruce says something that's very interesting to me. He says that he can't lead the team and he needs Clark to lead the team because Clark is more human than him.
Wow.
And
yeah.
And I think it's a good line in the sense that that's exactly what makes Superman work. Superman works because he's an alien among humans, but he's more human than most people because of his belief in his fellow man.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what makes Superman work. But at the same time, that isn't who Batman is. Batman works for some of the same reasons. Batman works because he is not an everyman, but he's a representation of what a human can do with just time and preparation.
Right.
And Batman, regardless if he thinks that Superman is a better leader than him for his altruistic qualities, he would come up with a plan. He would come up with the best plan to beat Steppenwolf. You mean to tell me after all this time that Batman would wait a year and his plan would be, well, let's just try and resurrect Superman? That's your plan?
Yeah, this is the same guy who in the comics had detailed files on how to kill every member of the Justice League just in case he had to.
Yeah, and I mean that's what I mean. That's why it just doesn't work. I mean, Batman and Superman are co-leaders in my opinion for a reason, but that's because Batman would come with logic, and I don't feel like this version of Batman was really logical. I don't think he was reasoning. I think he was just kind of like, well, we need Superman. That was kind of his whole motive for like most of the second act of this movie. Well, now that I know we can get Superman back, let's bring Superman back. Okay. Well, what's the rest of your plan? Oh, well, I'm just going to drive my car down there and hope that I distract enough of the aliens and they'll kill me. What? That's your plan?
Right. Oh, God. And in that scene, I'm watching it and I guess it didn't hit me until was it Aquaman that said that to him? This is your plan? And I'm honestly, it didn't hit me until then, but I thought, oh my God, it's a suicide mission. Why is he, what? Yeah, it's crazy.
Exactly. That's not who Batman is. Batman would have prepared a plan. And I don't feel like he ever planned anything throughout the entire movie. I mean, that was one of the big issues with Batman versus Superman as well. It was like, once his mission was to kill Superman, he never looked outside of it. He never tried to investigate who he was. He never tried to investigate anything. But that's who Batman is.
Of course, yeah. He's already done the work. By the time you enter the room, he's already won because he already knows. I mean, it's Benedict Cumberbatch portraying Sherlock Holmes. He's so freaking great at what he does that by the time you enter the room, it's over. You can't fool him. And that should be who Batman is. You think that's what we'll get with the new film?
I don't know. I mean, what I saw from the trailer looks good. I really am interested in what they're going to do with the Riddler. But it looks good. It looks like it's going to be a different take on Batman than we've seen. I don't know. I kind of have high hopes for it. I kind of want them to do something other than Batman for a while, but it's Batman. I'm gonna watch it.
Right. Well, I can't say I have high hopes for anything coming out of DC. It's not high hopes. It's a guarded, cautious optimism.
Well, what did you think of the Wonder Woman trailer? Was it 1984?
1984. Yeah. Did I miss something? How is Steve Trevor not dead? Did I miss something?
I'm assuming that's going to have something to do with the big bad of the movie. I'm assuming it's going to be some kind of trick or something. He's not really back.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But yeah. The movie looks really good. The action sequences they showed look great. I was a little bit leery of how they were going to do Cheetah, but Cheetah actually looks great.
She does, yeah, and she's usually not a dramatic actress. I love her. I love her to death. She's very good, but she's usually comedy.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, but I mean, this movie, man, you could just tell, and part of, not to jump into the should the Snyder Cut be made, should the Snyder Cut not be made debate. Part of me just feels like, all right, Snyder, just get your vision of what you want it to be out there, because it's clear that this thing got completely co-opted by Warner Brothers.
Right.
Because it's all over the place. It doesn't know what it wants to be. Like, there's no clear direction for most of this movie. Even the things that I feel like work, like I was saying that Superman is good in it. I enjoy him in it. And just some of the stuff that we see with Wonder Woman, I enjoy. None of it is as good as the collective whole. Like, none of the bright spots of it add up to a good movie. One of the other things I really enjoy is when they do bring Superman back and they have that short brawl where he just basically destroys all of them. Is when Flash shows up and he runs around them and he follows them at eye level the entire time. Like, nope, I'm just as fast as you.
That was pretty cool. I have to say that was pretty cool. When it comes to the powers and abilities of the characters, look, if you screw up the storytelling part and you can't get the characterizations down, if you just missed the boat or it got left on the cutting room floor, you just didn't bother to do it anyway, the least you can do is get the powers and abilities right. And they did get that right. I mean, the whole Speed Force deal, when every single time Barry leaves the room, he and I don't know if, are we supposed to be seeing the sparks, or is that just what happens in that brief nanosecond of time when he leaves and enters a room? Do you know what I mean? Like, because if you could visually see that, you're going to know it's the Flash every time. Do you know what I mean? But that kind of gets to be frustrating after a while. It's like, okay, enough with this. I get it. He's moving time and space when he runs, but I don't know. It kind of felt like they could have pulled back on that, but maybe I'm being too critical on that aspect.
I think the visuals around Flash and how he moves are great. Like, I like that. I don't like how it looks when he's running. It looks like he's like ice skating.
Yeah.
But I think all of the CG stuff they do around his running looks cool. His suit's not good.
Oh, it's awful. Awful.
It's yeah. Most of the suits in this movie are not good. Like, I don't really like the Batman suit in this movie.
Thank you.
I think Wonder Woman looks great. I think I think Superman's suit looks good. I don't like how padded it looks.
Oh yeah, that's the biggest problem with the superhero films, man. Is that, and Henry Cavill was in fantastic shape, dude. He had his shirt off.
Yeah, he looked great.
Yeah, like he didn't need all that.
Yeah, it just looked really padded. I think his suit looked better in Man of Steel.
Right. And Batman's suit, Superman's suit is ceremonial, right? But yes. Batman's suit should be functional, and what he's wearing is not functional. It looks like this is the bat suit for the wintertime. You know what I mean? It's terrible. He's sweating to death in that thing. Like, they're trying to talk to him, and he's having a heat stroke because he's sweating so much, you know.
It was one scene where it just looked so weird and hokey. I think it was the scene right after they had won, and the camera's coming up on them, and he's trying to move and turn towards Superman, and he just looks so uncomfortable.
And he can't move. He can't move. He can't turn his head. I'm like, dude, they fixed this in the Christopher Nolan Batman film. They gave Christian Bale a helmet to wear where he could move his head. Did you miss that film? You could have done it here too. Because it doesn't make any sense. He would have to turn his entire upper torso. It's like, did someone say my name? And he's got to turn. He can't move his head. Like, just, if you want to get away from Batman, just stand out of his peripheral and you'll be just fine, because he can't turn his head to catch you. So, yeah. But I'm with you. It just looked like it was, at any moment I was expecting to see the zipper. You know, it's like the first Swamp Thing costume from the Swamp Thing. You could see the zipper on the costume. I'm like, oh God. Then they couldn't even hide it. Like, I don't know. But yeah, I'm with you, man. I think, and dude, back to Cyborg. I love that almost every time we see him, the electronics and everything that's happening with him is evolving and it's changing and it's moving and it's different. And I like that. And by the end of the film, we see him in the actual, we come to know as the cyborg suit. And it's almost perfect to what we recognize. But I love how through the entire film, it's not always the same thing, which I thought was a nice touch. There's aspects of this film that I feel like they got right.
Yeah.
I think Cyborg's one of them.
I do think like just the decision to have his suit continue to evolve, or his body continue to evolve. I do like the way that he seemed on their level, because that's one of the things for having Cyborg in the Justice League. Like, if you're gonna graduate him up to being among guys like Batman and Superman, he has to feel like a legitimate threat. And I just think like him, like them spying on him, and he knew, and just everything he was doing with his powers, like being able to take control over whatever that thing is, the crawler that
the night crawler.
Night crawler. Being able to take control over that and use it, and just being able to use his powers in so many versatile ways. I thought that was really good. But I just wish they would have done a little bit more with his character, and that's probably just stuff that got left on the cutting room floor that we missed. But I mean, what was there worked. It's weird because I just think they came at the wrong time. Because you got to remember, like 2017, we were already far along at this point. We're heading into Civil War. And I'm looking at this thing like, oh man, we're getting Black Panther. Then I look across the street at what DC's doing. Yep, here's Cyborg. And it's like, oh.
That's a great reaction. Where you're like, hey,
like,
it's Cyborg. Oh crap. Yeah, that's good.
It's like, then that's not to say that Cyborg's a bad character, but it's just like, man, you guys got Martian Manhunter over there. You've got all these other characters that you're not using, and using Cyborg. It's like, okay. Like, again, like, that's not to throw shade at Cyborg, and that's not to throw, Ray Fisher under the bus, but it's just kind of like, it's like if you see that other people are making these movies where you are able to make these fantastic things reality. I mean, we've got Groot and Rocket on screen at this point.
Yes.
Like, why can't you go outside of the box and give us something else in a Justice League movie other than Cyborg? Why can't you give us, I don't know, like I said, where's Martian Manhunter? I don't know. You could have did anything.
Where's Black Lightning?
Yeah, and I think Black Lightning is a great character who belongs in the Justice League.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's numerous characters that they could have ran back to and got. And I mean, they threw that tease out there. Oh, we'll get a big table and there'll be 6 chairs. More.
Yeah.
And I guess now Wayne Manor is going to be, the headquarters.
I guess, I don't know. I mean,
even that, I don't want to get back into I hate Batman versus Superman, but come on, you're telling me that Bruce's mansion would get destroyed. We're talking about Bruce Wayne, that just his parents meant everything to him. He wouldn't let his parents' house be destroyed and not rebuild it.
Of course.
He wouldn't do that.
It's like the Chris Nolan Batman film when Katie Holmes is talking to Christian Bale and she says, "What are you going to do?" And he says, "Rebuild it brick by brick."
Yeah, because it's his parents' home. It's what they left for him. It's his legacy.
Absolutely. So when it comes to this film, and this is a sticking point for me, among other things, and I consider myself a fairly smart guy, especially when it comes to geek stuff. I've been reading comic books since before I could read. I mean, when all I could do was look at the pictures and didn't know how to read, I loved comic books. I love them now. And I grew up with these heroes, and I've seen them change over time. And comic books for me have been the one stable thing. I've got a few stable things that have always been there no matter what, and comic books is one of them. So I consider myself fairly smart about this genre. But man, this story lost me a couple of times. I went back and skipped back on the mother box explanation, and I'm like, wait a minute, what? Okay, so you got 3, but where'd they come from? Did they say? I don't remember. So you put them together. Don't ever put them together. Okay, so Steppenwolf's here. Where's Darkseid? Well, he mentioned him one time. All right, sweet. Is he going to show up? No, he's not going to show up. So, dude, did you have an easy time with this plot? Did you get everything? Because, man, I found myself lost more than one time.
It was very convoluted. It was very much, collect and be governed storyline.
Right.
It was very, all of the Darkseid stuff and all the Steppenwolf was just, it just wasn't, it didn't feel like there was legitimate stakes to it. You know what I mean? Like, it felt like, okay, he's going to collect these boxes. All right, but what do the boxes do when they bring it together? Something really bad's going to happen. Well, what? And then it's like,
right,
when he does collect them and it starts terraforming the area around it and everything's starting to change, it's like, okay, but what else? What else is so bad about him bringing these boxes together? That was never really explained. Steppenwolf's motives, I mean, like them doing the flashback scene, like I understood his motives in the sense that he failed and so he had to come back. But it's just like, okay, well, why now? Is it just because Superman was gone? Like, that doesn't work. I mean, because if it was just Superman that was standing in the way, well, Superman was kind of not there for a long time. There was a long time where Superman was on Earth and he wasn't active. So why not then?
Right.
It just wasn't explained well. The thing I will say with Steppenwolf that I thought was great was when he went to Themyscira to get that box, and the whole sequence with him against the Amazons, that stuff was great. Like them closing the gates on him and trying to run off, and then they kept like trying to get the box away from him, like tying the box to that bow and arrow and shooting it. Like all that stuff was cool.
Yeah, they made that work, and I'm with you. I thought that was pretty cool, and they worked as a unit. They worked together as a family because that's what they were. So that made sense that they would. I mean, they stayed behind and willingly were going to sacrifice themselves because they knew that was part of who they were. They were trained to do that. They're all prepared to die from the moment that they're born and become warriors later on. I mean, they know the deal. When the threat comes, you have to be willing to lay your life down. So that was. Yeah, I agree that was good and it fit. I have to say, I don't like the way he looked.
No,
I'm stunned at how bad he looks. Like, this is bad CG for 1995, in my opinion. And it's, man, we're 2020. When I see Robert Downey Jr. age back to 18, he looks amazing, and it looks real. And you're like, my God. That's phenomenal, and it works. This is terrible. This looks like someone did it at home and said, "Hey, look, man, I did a computer-generated image on the computer. It looks pretty cool." It's like some college grad did it in his dorm room. It just didn't work for me at all.
But again, I hate to keep making this comparison, but see, the other thing with Avengers, where Avengers worked, is you had this big world threat that brought them together, and you have this huge fight across New York. That's the third act, and it's worthy of having all of these big characters on screen. And this didn't feel like that. Most of it is just like all of them getting swatted away by Steppenwolf until Superman shows up, and then Superman just kind of beats him easily, and that's it.
Which explains why they didn't bring Superman back earlier, because it would have been a really short movie.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're trying to build this as this world threat where you needed all of them to stop it, it just didn't feel like that. And if the only reason it was to feel, compelled to get them all together is just like, oh, well, we have to do it together because we don't have Superman. It's like, you have the fastest man alive on the team. He can do more than, even if you're saying he's never been in a physical fight. That doesn't work because he can do more than just punch something. I mean, he could have ran around him and created a vortex. He could have done anything. He just kind of, they just were kind of like, oh, well, rescue those civilians over there.
He threw lightning in this
Yes.
film. Why couldn't he have thrown lightning at Steppenwolf and knocked him down at least? Like, yeah.
Yeah, and but that's part of them not, taking the time to form each character and, giving them, definitive constraints to their powers and constraints to, what their motives are. And that's one of the biggest flaws in this movie and how it just doesn't work. And I mean, it's so many things that are just in conflict in this movie. I mean, even the score of this movie, I mean, when they try and get the cheap nostalgia pops by bringing in the Elfman Batman theme a few times, it just doesn't work. It just feels hokey.
And the John Williams Superman theme, they did that a few times.
Yeah, it just didn't work. It just felt hokey. It was a lot of moments in this film that just felt unearned, and I think that was, that's partially because, they stumbled into this movie with Batman versus Superman being what it was. But then I think when you get the movie together and you bring all the characters together, they just did such a poor job of creating a conflict that felt important enough for them and then giving them all a drive towards ending it that worked. I don't know. I mean, we've seen other movies do this with less. I mean, I don't know if you watched the Justice League animated show that came out in like the 2000s, 90s.
Oh, yes, yes.
And they had the movie that started the season. I can't remember the name of it. But I feel like that movie did such a better job of bringing the Justice League together and then making them all important members of the cast and having a world threat that mattered. This didn't feel like that. This just felt like, well, Steppenwolf's here with a bunch of parademons. He's collecting all these boxes. They're gonna do something when he brings them together.
And they tried to tie all the characters to it because Cyborg is, built from technology from the Kryptonian ship and he's directly connected to everything. And I guess that makes sense. But for my money, why wouldn't Diana Prince have been the one to form the team? Why was it Bruce? Because wouldn't he have been defeated? Wouldn't he have been, I'm staying in Gotham, I'm doing what I know to do, it's my fault Superman's dead? Because this is a dark and brooding character.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, the thing that kind of bugged me is I'm fine with like Cyborg being connected to the mother boxes because that's how he got his abilities from the mother box. That works. But you don't really explain what Wonder Woman's connection to the mother boxes is, other than, she must know it from, Amazonian history. But if that's the case, then she knows how dangerous the boxes are. Why didn't she bring the team together like you said? Because she already knows what they are. She knows what they're for.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess in some weird way, I'm trying to rewrite this film where it would have worked, because it's like it's a Monday morning quarterback, right? You're just sort of, well, listen, if they'd done this in that game yesterday, it would have been fine. I don't know. It's probably a whole lot more than I could say to fix it. I will say again, there's some positive points in this film. I thought the parademons were freaking great. I loved them.
Yeah, I like the parademons. I did like the flashback where they showed like the old, like the entire, like the original fight for Earth for the mother boxes. Yes. I thought that was cool.
We saw the lanterns, and very quickly we saw lanterns, which was crazy.
Yeah. There was so much, and that's what I was thinking of when I was saying you can bring another character. You can bring Jon Stewart for this.
Oh, that dude! God, that would have been perfect. That would have been perfect.
It's like I don't understand picking Cyborg over Jon Stewart. Like, that's weird. But I don't want to get into Cyborg shouldn't be here, because I don't think the Cyborg is the problem here. It's just a lot of things that I didn't understand in the making of this movie. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of things that worked. I definitely liked again when Superman first comes back and they have their brief fight. I thought that was great. Um, I I I think the cast is good. I think one of the kind of hidden gems of this movie is just how good Jeremy Irons is as Alfred.
Oh, great.
Um, I thought the brief stuff we saw with Commissioner Gordon was good. Uh, yeah, I mean the cast of this kind of elevates this from being a completely terrible movie. But it's, I mean, that's kind of what some of the only redeeming parts about it is the cast is so good. And I mean, even they're not good enough to save certain parts of this movie. Like, there's just some clumsy parts of it that just don't work. I really enjoyed the race in the credit scene. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, but dude,
Um,
I couldn't stop staring at his lip. I'm sorry to keep going back to that, but my God. Dude, it ruined the movie for me. I swear to God it did. It ruined it.
it is really, really distracting. Yeah, but I thought like the whole race that was great. I mean, even their scene when he went to save the family in the truck, and then you see Superman flying with the whole building. That was great.
That was cool. Yeah.
I really enjoyed the other post credit sequence with Lex and Deathstroke.
Yes.
I thought that was great, and I think it's a shame we're probably not going to see an Injustice League. We're probably not going to see a sequel to this movie. But yeah, I'm trying to think of many other good things I can say about it. Because there were good things. It was a big, big mess of a movie.
And you know that you raise a very interesting point. At the end of the day, when all the discussion is had about this film, this is probably one and done. This is it. I mean, if there's another Justice League film, it's not going to have the same actors in it. It's not going to be the same situation. Zack Snyder may or may not ever be attached to it again. I don't know.
Well, it depends on how well the Snyder Cut does on HBO Max. I think if it does well, there could be demand for it. I'm not sure, but maybe. I don't know. We never thought that he was gonna get a miniseries, so you just never know.
That's a good call. Yeah, good call. I mean, I don't know. Everyone in this film, I don't know. Dude, even now, I'm trying to save this thing. Like I'm trying to come up with ways because I'm a fanboy at heart. I didn't want this film to fail, and
No.
I've had conversation with friends like, "Oh, dude, you're so in the bag for Marvel." I am. I'm guilty as charged. It doesn't mean I want this to fail. I don't want the Valiant universe to fail if and when it ever gets up and running. I want every comic book universe that gives it a go in this medium, whether it's TV, film, whatever, even just streaming service. I want them to be, because if they are, that means they'll keep making this stuff.
Yeah,
That's what I want.
it's kind of like wrestling. Like, we're both wrestling fans. It's kind of like I hear people say, "Oh, well, you're just so down on WWE. You want AEW to be good. You want WWE to fail." And I don't. I want WWE to make the best product that they can because I enjoy wrestling. So I want everybody that's making wrestling to succeed. And it's the same thing with comics. I love comic books, so I want comic book movies to succeed. When I was growing up, Justice League was the super team. It wasn't Avengers. We weren't looking forward to an Avengers movie until like maybe 20 years ago. That wasn't the case at one point. When I was growing up, we all wanted Justice League. So to get in my 30s and we get a great Avengers movie and not a great Justice League movie, I would have never thought that would be the case.
Yeah, same here, because they already had the pieces. I mean, you already had Michael Keaton was established, and Brandon Routh came later, and you had other pieces of the puzzle that could have been put in. Wonder Woman had not been done yet, but it could have been. There had always been rumors of a certain actress is named in possibly playing Wonder Woman, and it was always kind of swirling around. But it did kind of feel like Justice League would make it to the screen before Avengers did, and then, lo and behold, the MCU happened with just one film. I mean, had the first Iron Man failed, that would have been it. Had that movie been laughed off the screen, had it been hokey, had it been just a critical and financial failure, the MCU doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But they did the smart thing. They didn't start with Captain America. They didn't start with Thor. You don't start with the heavy hitters. I mean, Iron Man's a heavy hitter, yes, but how many of regular people just walking around knew who Iron Man was? They know him now, but they didn't know him then.
He was a D-list character when I was growing up.
Right.
And I liked Iron Man, but he was a niche character. It wasn't like most people in households knew who Iron Man was. They didn't know who Tony Stark was. But I mean, DC had the biggest head start in the world on Marvel. They were already owned by the biggest production company in the world, in Warner Brothers. They already had the biggest head start they could have possibly had. Marvel didn't get their own studio until when? 2008 to 2007?
Yes.
So, yeah, they had the biggest head start in the world, and it still took them that long to make a Wonder Woman movie. It still took them that long to make an Aquaman movie. So, I mean, there's really no excuse in that way. I mean, they had made Batman and Superman movies before, and they were huge successes. But they never tried to do anything other than those two characters. And they've got a wealth of characters over there, man. They've got a wealth of characters. And they've got a wealth of characters that they don't have to do as much work to establish like Marvel did. Because the other thing with Marvel, yeah, they didn't have their own studio until 07, 08, or whenever it was officially established, but they didn't have the rights to any of their characters until then.
True.
All of their characters were sold off to other companies. I mean, they are just now getting all of their flagship characters back. They're just now getting Spider-Man. They don't really have Spider-Man. They have him on loan.
Right.
They're just now getting X-Men back. Warner Brothers had all of their characters all this time. And it just shouldn't have been this hard. It shouldn't have been this hard to establish these characters and bring them together in one movie. It shouldn't have taken a competition doing it and making $1 billion.
You're right. Like you said, they had it in-house. They already had all the tools at their disposal, and they just... at the end of the day, what it really boils down to is the DCEU, I guess is what they call their extended universe. They don't have Kevin Feige. I mean,
I think that's the big problem. They don't have a big singular voice that's bringing everybody together.
They've handed it to Jim Lee now, and I love Jim. Jim's one of the best comic book artists I've ever seen. But he's the comic book guy. I don't know.
Wasn't Jeff ahead of it at some point too? Jeff Johns?
He was, yes. He stepped down. He's still there as something. And it may have either been a promotion. I don't think it was demotion. I think he stepped aside and Jim was promoted. And hey, listen, I'd love to be wrong. I'll eat my words if this time next year we're talking about the new Batman film is the coolest thing ever, and it's, Warner Brothers is back on board saying, God, yes, here we go. Let's do this Justice League thing again, man. We can kill it this time. That's fine. I think there has to be a different approach. I don't know.
Well, they're in such a weird spot now because you're moving forward with Wonder Woman, it seems like, as a franchise, but you're rebooting Batman
again.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know. I want all of their characters to succeed. I would love to see another Aquaman movie. I would love to see Wonder Woman continue to succeed. I don't know if we're ever going to get this Flash movie that they've been talking about for years. I don't know what's happening there. They keep saying it's coming, but they keep losing directors on it. I don't know. I think there was a Cyborg movie in the works at one point. I don't think that's still happening. I don't know. Everything is in free fall over there. But that's why this Snyder Cut thing is so interesting. I don't think it'll completely right the ship, but it could feasibly create more interest in the Justice League as a property. And maybe that could lead to them completely rebooting and doing another Justice League. I don't know. Maybe Snyder comes back at the helm and does another Justice League. I don't know. I think that was a big part of the problem to begin with. I think you should have given Snyder one property to head off and not had him take on the entire franchise. I think that was a mistake.
Yeah, DC just gave him the keys to the kingdom, didn't they? Just said,
Yeah, and I don't think he gets enough of the stuff that makes the entire universe tick because he has a clear taste in comics. And that's the kind of comics like Watchmen, Frank Miller comics. That's his wheelhouse, and that stuff is fine. I didn't think Watchmen was horrible. I thought it was fine. But I don't need the guy that has that taste in comics creating the entire universe because he has a clear palette.
For me, I think you lost me the moment you suggested that it was okay that Batman is a murderer because it's a new day.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And again, when Superman snapped Zod's neck, I thought, I can't believe he just killed him. There was no other way. There was no other way to stop him. Like, I don't know. To me, and I'm old fashioned when it comes to this stuff, man. My heroes don't. The Punisher's different, Yeah. And it's the Punisher's not a hero, and maybe one day we'll do an episode on the Netflix Punisher series, which is freaking amazing, and John Bernthal is just the best of all time. But he's not a hero. That's not who he is, and that's different. But man, Superman's not a murderer. Batman's not a murderer, because if they are, then you're essentially saying there's no difference now. There's no difference. They do what the criminals do. I mean, what's next? Does Batman, does he try some heroin? What's next? Does Superman beat up Lois Lane because he's mad at her? I mean, it seems like a stretch, but at one point, those two characters murdering people was a stretch as well, and now we've seen it. I mean, that fight scene in Batman v Superman, when Batman puts the guy's head through the floorboard, that guy's dead. He ain't getting back up.
Yeah. I mean, the lengths that Batman went with Superman and how far he went with that fight were just too much for me too. And there's a way to do things. There's a way to straddle that line. But it just didn't work for me. I mean, even in this movie, when Bruce is talking to Diana and he decides he's just going to start drinking, like, no, Batman doesn't drink.
Right.
Like, no, but again, they're trying to sell us on this old, bitter, seasoned Batman, and that works if we got the character development to build up to that. You can't just introduce us to that character right away. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, even when Batman introduced a pretty good question, I felt like when he questioned Diana and said, "Why have you not done anything all this time? Why did you wait until Luthor stole a picture of Steve Trevor for you to all of a sudden appear again?" And I thought that was a great question because I was like, okay, you're Wonder Woman. Why have you been in the shadows all the time? That's not what Wonder Woman does.
Right. And for me, if I had to narrow all this down, and I'm going to get your last word in a minute, so I don't know if you'll be on the same page with me or not. I think so at this point, but for me, the reason this didn't work is because when you lose the essence of who these characters are, you've already lost. The film's already going to be a failure. The fans are going to turn on it. No one's going to like it because you've lost the characters. Dude, and I'm sorry, I'll go back to Marvel. I don't care. They never lost Steve Rogers. They never lost him, dude. From the moment that Steve Rogers jumped on that grenade, I had tears in my eyes I still do. I got cold chills right now thinking about it. They nailed it. They knew who he was. And it wasn't, we should have this guy jump on because it's an army and no, because that's who he is. Yeah. And they had the characters, they knew going in who the characters are. The DC guys, they don't know, or they don't care to know.
Well, to that point, to add to that, the thing that I think that Marvel does exceptionally well, and not even just Marvel at this point, I've seen other, like Sony has done it well at this point too. Like, even if they don't get the character perfect, they managed to take us on a journey with that character where we get the reward. Like even if someone does something that we're all as comic fans sitting wringing our fists like, oh, he would never do that. You still get a moment later where it's like, no, that's the journey. Like, for example, like Steve not telling Cap that he knew that Winter Soldier killed his parents. Like, that feels like such a betrayal, but you still get the reward of it later. Like, oh, Steve, you did that. And then it's like, well, Steve did it because that's his friend. That's his best friend in the entire world. So of course he would protect him. And then you get the moment later where when he does decide to hand the shield over, he finally understands, like, I cannot give this to Bucky, even though he is my friend, because of what I know you've done. Like, even though I know you didn't do it intentionally, I know that there's too much blood on your hands to be Captain America.
That's a great point. And dude, without saying that, without them ever saying that in the film, it would make sense that he would hand the shield to Falcon. You're completely right. It makes 100% sense on that, because you're right. Bucky does have too much blood on his hands. He would have turned it down. He would have said no.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think but see, that's because I feel like it's earned. We got 3 movies with these 2 characters, and it's earned at that point where they both know. They don't have to say it. Like, no, I know. We both know that I don't deserve the shield. We both know that it belongs to Sam.
Yeah, that's great stuff. That is another example of these creators in that universe talking, communicating, being on the same page, following a basic outline. The outline's not tough, folks. It's not too complex that you can't do it. The outline's very simple. Dance with the one who brung you. What worked? What these books have sold millions of copies all around the world. That's not an accident. That's not, oh, well, it's just kids being kids. No, not at all. I mean, these characters work for a reason. And if you can capture that and put it on the screen, you're going to make a ton of money. You're going to make the fans happy, and you're going to have a franchise that's going to last forever if you do it right, which is what the MCU did. It's not about monopolizing the medium. It's not about, controlling everything. It's not about, we're going to show up DC. I don't think they care about that. They just care about telling good stories, and they do it all the time. Big difference.
Yep.
Big difference. So we didn't exactly do a deep dive on this film, but I think we touched on a lot of stuff. And let's face it, going scene by scene in this film may not have been too awful fun. So
probably not.
No. But again, as I told you before, I didn't hate rewatching this, but my radar was up maybe more than it was the first time. So in the end, what's your last word on Justice League, the film?
I think at least on my last word, I would say that on second watch, there was enough here to give me hope that I hope someone takes on the franchise and does something great with these characters someday. Because there's so much potential there.
I agree with that. There's a lot here. There's years and years and years of storytelling. And just take one great storyline that did sell a ton of books, that did get the fans talking. Take that storyline and make it a film. It didn't have to be Steppenwolf, who the average moviegoer has no idea who that is. Darkseid would have been a much better villain. And, Marvel, swung for the fences with Thanos because it made sense, because that's the big bad. That's the ultimate big bad. And it worked. And, I compare because I want this to work. I want this to get better. And I'm like you. I think it has a possibility to get better. And even if they decide not to revisit this, if they continue to go with solo films, if the time ever comes where maybe they do come back together, with any luck, this thing will get off the ground this time and it will be a success. So fingers crossed. And that is Justice League. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.